Today we are joined by Jeff Waldman. Jeff, welcome to the podcast. It is so great to have you today.
Thank you for having me, Lindsay.
Super excited to chat with you, Jeff. We've known each other for a number of years and work in the same ecosystem here in Toronto. And you are the founder of two amazing organizations, ScaleHR and SocialHRCamp, that have such a great presence within the Canadian technology and HR community. So tell us what inspired you to start those organizations.
Social HR Camp was actually started, by accident, and it was actually in 2012. It's been a while. So I ran a conference in 2011, and it was all about basically adopting social media and technology in the HR world. And so back then, obviously, it was fairly new, and of course, back then it was all about LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and
Hmm.
from the social side. And so the HR community was sort of grappling with trying to, figure that out. And I started doing a ton of work with my peers and, leaders and, organizations. And I thought, you know what, let's just, create an event, sort of leverage my interest and skills in teaching and training and learning and bring everyone, together to learn and just learn, from peers and experts and thought leaders. So that's how Social HR Camp was born. And since then, it obviously evolved into more of a theme, type concept. And so we just ran one in Vancouver on basically how to approach, layoff and an ultra competitive
Hmm.
job market. And so, as long as the community wants it, I'll just keep giving it. And, I've done on probably over 45 of them now in the
Wow.
10 plus years in, various cities around North America. And the next one's going to be in Montreal, which is going to be October 26th. So, that is all about hands-on learning, bringing,
Hmm.
community together, bringing sponsors on board, vendors, and, giving people an opportunity to speak like yourself, which
Hmm.
you've done one before. So that's why I've done that. And then Scale HR was born out of the pandemic. Circumstantial. I came back to Toronto on March 15th with no job
Wow.
opportunities. And I thought, okay, so now what? March 15th of 2020, when basically, the whole world sort of blew up. And I
Hmm.
started working with the company, and that just sort of morphed into Scale HR. And so we've actually pivoted. We're doubling down on our expertise in all things skill development, which
Hmm.
two audiences, leaders and then HR practitioners in tech. So, and then we obviously have our event that sort of flow into that. So it's hyper focused on that. We need more skills, than ever before,
Hmm.
and that's what we're focused on.
Yeah, that is such a truth. There's a phrase that's been floating around, and I think it's being used more and more nowadays, is this concept of building skills-based organizations
Sure.
and the whole concept of upskilling. I'd love to hear from your perspective. What does that mean? What do you think that means for organizations, and then what do you think it means for specifically HR leaders?
So that's a loaded question, which is fine. I mean, but I think the the business climate today is so complicated and it changes
Hmm.
so quickly. And that's been, we've been saying that, for years. But I think what the pandemic has obviously created some other issues. And, so HR practitioners and leaders are being asked to do more with less. They're being asked to somehow magically generate new skills and capabilities. And that just doesn't come out of thin air. You need
Hmm.
a concerted and relentless investment and effort on continuing your skills development, and that can be done through sort of old school training. It can be done through self-directed learning, peer-to-peer learning, case studies, focus groups, networks, events, and so on. And so it's really important if you're asking HR leader to lead your companies through change and so on. They need to have that skill set, and so they need to be at the forefront. And if they don't have it, then you need to develop it. But obviously with that technology changing constantly, that needs to be at the forefront. And so
Hmm.
upscaling to me is just the continuous, investment and effort in, always learning new things.
Hmm.
So,
It sounds like based on what you were just saying, it's not just the investment in like the technology or the training courses or the facilitators you're bringing in, but investment in terms of making the time for your leaders, your people in general to
yeah.
actually do that training, whether it's self-directed or whether it's a team or a company or in-house, out of house. Time is such a valuable resource, and it sounds like that's an investment that companies also need to make, not just on the financial side.
You're 100%. And, you can invest in a training program and you can
Hmm.
put your people through a program, whether it be, one training course or modular, it doesn't really matter what it
Hmm.
is. But once they leave the comfort or the structure of that, so, learning environment,
Hmm.
then they go back to their jobs. And what happened to those skills? Do they actually adopt them?
Hmm.
Hmm, I don't know. So it's really important that companies make the investment and the effort to ensure that those new skills are actually adopted into practice. And so that's where the concept of sort of peer-to-peer coaching and
Hmm.
support comes into play. And those companies who actually do that part of it, which is a long-term investment, will always see a much better outcome. Always.
Hmm. Absolutely. And what, because that can be a tricky thing. It can be tricky to advocate for taking time, encouraging your people and your leaders, well, not maybe your leaders, but your people to take out time to do that coaching or to practice a skill that they've learned. How can HR leaders be leading voices and advocate advocate for that investment of time once people are back on the job?
Well, I think it starts earlier than that. I think, one of
Hmm.
the things that, I've done a lot of work in is helping HR leaders sort of re-strategize. And so,
Hmm.
like, even if they have like an HR strategy, which, as you probably know, many don't, and they're
Hmm.
sort of just operating on the fly, and that's really difficult to do. So they're always constantly reacting. And so the idea is that the HR leaders need to be strong business people, need to
Hmm.
understand the business of the organization and need to understand clearly what the top 3 to 5 core objectives are for the company. And that's your roadmap, really, to build your HR strategy. And if you are going to do something on the skills side of things, then that needs to be just fully embedded into that
Hmm.
so that it becomes part of your DNA. If it's sort of an afterthought, people will always push back, and people don't like change. They're like, well, I don't like this, I'm not doing it. But if you've already gotten the sign off of your peer group in terms of the
Hmm.
C suite, then it becomes part of your activities and sort of day
Hmm.
to day work. And the other thing I'll add too is that as you probably know, Lindsay, leading HR for your company, employee engagement data is crucial, and so one of the top areas that drive engagement are ongoing learning and career
Hmm.
support. So if you're offering skill development training that feeds right into the business and it also helps people grow their career, I mean,
Hmm.
those that care about it will be all over it, and those that
Yeah.
don't, well, you can sort of bring them along, slowly. But
Yeah. What's interesting too is that good management, good leadership, and good relationship with your manager are also drivers of engagement. So, how do you think organizations need to rethink how they train and set expectations and build a culture of leadership within their organization?
so I think just a couple of things come to mind. One is, obviously skill development training. I've always embedded it right into performance management. So performance
Hmm.
management, people think that it's just about, telling people what they did wrong and,
Yeah.
hasta la vista. Well, no, it's much more than that. A performance management, like the whole goal of it is to actually improve, performance,
Hmm.
right? And then to sort of keep people engaged. And so a big part of that is obviously having those conversations and the skills development side of things too. That needs to be part of it. And so I think that's the first thing is that if you've got a performance management process and it does
Hmm.
not involve ongoing support skill development, then that needs to change, right?
Hmm.
And I think what was the second part of your question?
In fostering a culture of
Right.
leadership within organizations.
Um, and then about leadership, yeah. So I'm drawing a blank here. So that's the first, yeah. That's the first thing. It needs to be embedded, but also it needs to start with the top in terms of
Hmm.
practicing what you preach, right? So
Hmm.
if you're telling other people to do something and you don't do it, then it's not going to happen.
Right.
So,
Hmm. And as we've been talking about this, I think a couple times it's come up that HR leaders really need to be working to get that buy-in from the C-suite, from their executive peers and from the top leadership. So it sounds like a key skill of HR practitioners today is the ability to influence and persuade.
absolutely.
Yeah. Are there
So,
other, oh, sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I took a class back in business school. So this is going back a while because I'm old. Um, but um, and I didn't really get a lot out of my business program,
Hmm.
back in the day. But one class that I loved was the art of uh, 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 influencing. So
Hmm.
it's all about bargaining,
Hmm.
and trying to get a better deal. So, but the idea behind it was how do you position something so that
Hmm.
you're not sort of sneakily trying to get your way, but it's doing it in a smart and genuine way. And I think
Hmm.
that's something that like HR leaders have to have. I mean, the best business people out there are really good at sort of influencing, and I think that's a
Hmm.
skill, and that's not easy. And that's not easy, but
Hmm.
the easiest way to start it with the actual business case. So,
Hmm.
HR people, like, I'm sort of a culprit of it, back in the day when I used to talk about concept or idea in big lenses. Well, the poor president or the CFO or the CMO is like, what the hell are you talking about? So then I learned quickly that I need to translate these ideas into their language and being
Hmm.
able to identify what the potential outcomes are. And if I can do that, then theoretically I can get buy-in. They can understand that.
Hmm. So almost like tapping into their minds and their
Absolutely.
worlds. And that
Yeah,
sounds like you said it's the true business partnering side of
absolutely.
HR.
So every single time that I've gone into an organization as a fractional person or I'm in-house,
Hmm.
back in the day, the first person that I always met with was the CFO. And the reason why is because in an SMB, the CFO, typically, wields a bit more power and influence because of money. And so it was really important to me that I build that sort of, instant connection with that person there.
Hmm.
So then it becomes a lot easier for me to actually work with them. Second person was the chief marketing officer, and then third was the president, and that's sort of how I did it. But it's really important that
Hmm.
the HR leader needs to be business savvy, obviously,
Hmm.
so that they can actually do those things properly.
Interesting that the CMO was the second person on your list. Can you talk a
Yeah,
bit
I know
more
some people
about
have thought
the?
I was. Well, that's all about branding. So,
Hmm.
in marketing, one of the things about employer brand, obviously, is
Hmm.
that it does require very similar, virtually the same skill set as any marketer would have when they're sort of branding and marketing product and services. And so, in
Hmm.
marketing, typically we're more staffed than the HR team was,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Obviously. So
Pretty
then you would
common.
go to them and you would steal some of their time. And they've got,
Hmm.
the expertise, they have the tools already, and so they were really, really able and willing. Once I told them that if we do this, that it'll actually help them from
Hmm.
a sort of a product service marketing and branding point of view.
Hmm. And on that concept of employer branding, you talked about at the beginning, part of the reason you started Social HR Camp. And that clearly was an instance of technology transforming the way that HR operates. What are some other ways that you're seeing now in the year 2023 that technology is transforming
Oh my God.
HR?
Well, I mean, now that, just so don't forget that technology, typically evolves and shifts based
Hmm.
on where the business is going. So the business
Right.
climate is going. So nowadays, so just the last couple of years, we've had workforces completely shattered the old school mindset of all commuting into an office and in one
Hmm.
place. Now most of our teams are you know everywhere.
Hmm.
They're working from home. They could be sitting in Vancouver. They could be sitting in Tokyo, Japan. It doesn't really
Yep.
matter. And so that connection between all of those team members is software, technology, cloud
Right.
software, SaaS based. And so um, the organizations that were able to adapt after COVID hit through technology were the ones that were able to more seamlessly, continue operation. Those that were not sort of adoptive of, like the Google Workspaces, Slack, video technologies, and so on and so on, were scrambling.
Hmm.
And so I think that the first thing is the collaborative, social collaborative technologies that are connected to every part of work, collaboration, document management, conversation, chat, video,
Hmm.
on and on. The second one is AI, so artificial
Hmm.
intelligence, which for a lot of HR practitioners is like, I don't even know what that is, or I sort of know what it is, but I don't really know.
Hmm.
Um, and I think there's a couple of things there. One is AI is enabling workplace technology to be able to take over some of the administrative and sort of ongoing tasks of the HR. So instead of manually responding to all of your employees with the same question, you've
Hmm.
got AI that's able to do that for you. They can also
Hmm.
take over calendar management, which is another huge burden for HR practitioners. And so and then they can also sort of get into analytics, which is
Hmm.
where you sort of excel. Lindsay, so you can
Hmm.
probably sort of say more on this, but um, HR used to have sort of a reporting function through the HRIS, but they were pretty weak. And so now you've got platforms that can give you insight and trend and actually give
Hmm.
you the data point that actually help you sort of move faster. The other one is around brand experience. So when you have career sites, social media sites, other sort of internal platforms and so on, chatbots and sort of AI powered platform can actually enable the desirable experience that
Hmm.
you want, from an employee brand point of view. So the classic case would be job seekers, right? So they send
Right.
in a resume and there's a black hole. They don't know what's going on and they have no clue what's going on. So they can actually, interact with an AI chatbot that can then sort of transition into a real person. So these
Hmm.
are all things that are starting to really take hold. And
Yeah.
I think, companies have to be all over it.
What's so interesting about the applications that you just described is it almost sounds like, in a way, I might be stretching here, but it's almost that the applications of AI and other technologies within HR and within organizations actually can maybe humanize the experience a bit more. And what I mean by that is you just gave the example of a job seeker sending a resume and it going into a black hole and they don't even have an opportunity to get an answer or have any way of gathering information about where that went, whereas now there's this intermediary that sort of starts to open that door to or that path to getting to a real person. So it's almost creating connection as opposed to actually uh as opposed to um I guess in a bad way, like people are worried that it's going to take away the human experience. It sounds like what you're just saying is it can maybe help to connect people and create more human experiences.
It can definitely do that if
Hmm.
it's done right. So don't forget that the market, the broader sort of HR tech market, it
Hmm.
it it is actually one of the fastest growing segments right now. So
Hmm.
it's a very saturated market out there. So people are always
Hmm.
seeing new tools and platforms. And I mean, I've been in HR tech for over 20 years, and this was
Hmm.
going back to the PeopleSoft days. Um, and I have been around it for 20 years, and I'm still learning about new platforms that I never even heard of. And so I think the trick, though, is for any HR leader and team is you can only do so much. So you need to focus
Right.
on the business requirements and then find, the right solutions that actually work for you. And yes, you will come across better ones, but at least you've got something that is doing what it wants, right? What you want it
Hmm.
to do. If you find a solution that looks cool but doesn't actually create a better experience for your
Hmm.
users, just don't use it
Yeah.
or change it or deal with something different. So there's nothing more frustrating than interacting with a chatbot for 15 minutes.
Right.
It
And getting
if I
it
want
just
an answer to
loops.
something, and it just goes through circles. So while you've invested in a piece of software that may seem great, but the
Hmm.
experience sucks because they didn't do it right.
Hmm. It sounds like what you're saying HR leaders should be mindful of is what is the value you're trying to create with this tool and making sure that when you're vetting those tools, it can deliver on that value that you're looking to create.
Absolutely. I have a process, that I've taken countless companies through, the HR teams through, and trying to identify, the right sort of HR tech stack. And
Mhm.
it starts off with it being nothing to do with the actual software itself. It's all about
Right.
the business and sort of what are you trying to achieve. And I think that's actually really important because while company A and B may use these certain tools, those tools may like not be appropriate for you,
Mhm.
um, and you wouldn't know that unless you went through this process properly.
Right. And we've seen, I was actually speaking with someone the other day about that if we don't use technology right, it can actually create more problems. It can create more challenges for us. The example they gave is when Amazon implemented AI within their hiring, and it was the bot itself was had inherent biases, and that obviously the output of that was biased hiring, and it led to a lack of equality and equity amongst
Right.
the people they were hiring. And so as we're shifting into a world where the focus and importance of building diverse, equitable, inclusive environments is coming to the forefront, that sounds like inherently it has to be a part of the value and experience that we're hoping our technology will drive.
Yeah, it's a really difficult, challenge because if you believe that technology will be able to do everything for you, and
Hmm.
that person is sort of out of it, that's not going to happen. So
Right.
the whole idea of technology is for it to be tools that will enable
Hmm.
something to happen, and
Hmm.
it gives you other data points. So in the case of Amazon, and then the hiring problems, it's important that it's supposed to be a data point. And so they realized that it was not working, right? So they kind
Right.
of, so through their sort of hiring processes, that sort of AI tool probably was part of that process. And they realized, but it wasn't working properly. So they could have fixed it, or they could have stopped using it, right?
Hmm.
But you're right. It needs to, diversity and inclusion is difficult because there are so many things that actually make it different, and it's not just sort of any one thing or a couple of things.
Right.
It's like a million things,
Hmm.
and so yeah, so technology has to be a part of that.
Hmm. What are the, like you just said, there's a million different things that have to go into like creating authentically diverse, equitable, and inclusive organizations. What are some of those that you think are are key and that HR leaders should be thinking about and should be focusing on within their
So this
organization?
is my favorite question because so obviously I'm hard of hearing, and so I was born with the hearing loss, and so obviously I kind of jumped into this world just because of my own personal
Hmm.
case. But I'm going to be a little bit brash about this. Talk is cheap. So I see so many
Mm,
organizations talk about this stuff, and they say, we're a diverse organization, and we want to be, diverse, and we're sponsoring this event, or we're doing that. But all of that is, and I'm going to swear, it's complete bullshit if you don't actually practice the
right.
inclusion. So what I mean by that is, diversity is just the visual imagery and the count of the
Hmm.
people that fit into the different groups, and obviously
Right.
being in Canada, we're the most uh, diverse country in the world. So I mean,
Hmm.
it's really important that our organization, visually, reflect that of a marketplace, which is fine.
Hmm.
Okay, but then it's another thing to actually practice inclusion.
Hmm.
That's where it gets hard.
Hmm.
It's really hard because that's where and it's not about creating a program
Right.
or putting a plaque on the wall or sponsoring an organization or any of those types of things. It's about how do you change your internal practices of your organization and your business so that they overlay a diversity and inclusion lens.
Hmm.
And it's not a standalone strategy. So
Right.
if you think that as an HR leader you can go away and go, yeah, I'm going to build my, DNI strategy and I'm just going to roll it out. Well, what's going to happen is it's going to be full of sort of like singular programs and tactics, which
Hmm.
to me doesn't really sort of influence change. If you overlay it onto, HR strategies, so you start to change the hearts and minds of people and,
Hmm.
so that they start asking questions, they start learning, and they start opening up their hearts and minds, you will start to see change happen in
Hmm.
that day-to-day practice. So that's what it's really all about.
Hmm. Have you seen in your work with different organizations, have you seen a tactic or a an approach that stands out to you for starting to change the hearts and minds of people and getting them to open up?
Yeah, actually, one organization that's actually based in Toronto, it's called, and I have to be careful, but it's called Bench Sci. So
Hmm.
you probably heard of them. They're a really cool technology company, and the reason why that I'm talking about them is because their founder and
Hmm.
CEO, openly talks about this stuff, but they actually embed some of these things that that they talk about into their practices sort of internally,
Hmm.
and and they offer training courses, they
Hmm.
offer educational courses, they offer they bring in experts from different areas to
Hmm.
sort of talk about their challenges and so on, and then allow people just to ask questions. And so the idea behind what they're doing is that they are creating a culture where it's actually encouraged and acceptable for people to ask questions. That's one of the hardest things is that, and for me
Right.
personally, being hard of hearing is I always encourage people, to ask a question. And people, since, like since I was a small boy, they always said, well, I don't want to embarrass you. I'm like, screw that. Ask me the question because I want
Right.
you to learn. Right. And
Hmm.
then the other thing that they've done is they've actually created a set of questions. One is, how can I help you? Right. So, for example, Lindsay, if you would ask me, say, Jeff, I know that you're hard of hearing. I don't know anything about it, but, please tell me about it. And then how can I help you do better? So, for
Right.
example, I can say to you, well, I lip read, um, make sure that you're in a quiet area. So if you're, doing this call by airport, for example, and it's like loud planes everywhere, but I may have some problem. But, and things like that. So that those are small little tidbits that you didn't know before, but
Right.
now and it's all done through being curious and then asking questions.
Hmm. And authentic, it sounds like an authentic
It has to be.
curiosity, an authentic desire to learn and to understand, and a willingness to be wrong and
Of course.
have an opportunity to learn and do better in the future. There's a great quote by I believe it's Maya Angelou that it says, "When once you do your best until you know better, and then when you know better, do better." And it sounds like that's
Yeah.
what you believe and what implementing this practice of just ask the questions reflects.
but it has to be genuine. You're absolutely right on that.
Hmm.
So, for example, so one of the key things, what I've done is I say to someone, and, it depends on the context, right? So if this is the first time that you're having a conversation with someone, then it's probably best to do it in private, sort of one-on-one. And you say to
Yeah.
them, I want to thank you for being open to having this conversation with me. I
Yeah.
have to be honest, I don't know anything about it. I have never been around someone who dealing with it or gone through this. So, I want to, to educate myself. And I'm going to
Hmm.
ask you questions and you tell me if it's okay,
Hmm.
because they have to be okay with it. And
Right.
also say, I may ask the questions that may not sound correct, right?
Hmm.
But just, just correct me and teach me. And once you do that, they start to let their guard down because they actually see it as a genuine offer.
Hmm. And going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation today about this environment of continuous learning, of peer-to-peer learning, it sounds like this is just an extension of that. It just happens to be from a lens of not necessarily a skill, but more of knowledge and awareness.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, people learn differently.
Hmm.
Some people learn by just sort of hearing a podcast or
Hmm.
whatever. For me, I don't. I'm a very visual doer, so I need to kind
Hmm.
of see it and feel it and actually practice it and do
Yep,
it. So
me
that's
too.
why like audio podcasts, while they might be entertaining, I get bored with them. So, and some people like, self-directed video
Hmm.
learning. I don't. I like
Hmm.
the live sort of a classroom kind of a structure so I can
Yeah.
ask questions and all that kind of stuff. Um, I love project. I learn from project, but other people don't. So
Hmm.
they're different, learning style. And I think it's important to offer all of that. And now with the nature of cloud technologies and also video, I mean, you can record a session and you can upload it to your internal wiki and categorize skills, and people can sort of watch videos and search and so on. And so there's no reason why you can't do that, and you don't need to have expensive software. Like an
Hmm.
intranet platform, you can use a wiki like Coda, which is my favorite one. You can set it up as your internal page. There's a password that's it, behind the firewall, costs you $10 a month, and you
Yep.
can create content. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways for people to learn, whether it be live or, it's just, like a database
Yeah.
of content.
Yeah, and that's one of the amazing gifts of the age that we're in is that the democratization of access to knowledge and it is so broad. And I'm curious if you see, it sounds like you see benefits, but I'm curious if you see any consequences that this creates for organizations, specifically HR professionals.
Yeah. So one of the things, that I get a lot is if I'm coaching like an HR leader or I'm, meeting with people is, they say, Jeff, yeah, so I read this article or case study a few weeks ago. It was about Netflix. And I go, stop right there. Stop, please. And I go, well, first of all, you're not Netflix. And
Yeah.
secondly, while it's important to read stuff, you really have to ensure that you sort of understand, to your own context. So there's
Hmm.
so much information out there, and a lot of it is great information, and a lot of it is not so great information. And I think people get sort of overloaded with almost like a FOMO concept, where they're sort of fear of missing out,
Hmm.
and so they have to do more research and da da da. Da. And I think it creates the idea that HR leaders get paralyzed because they're not confident in what they want to do because
Hmm.
they've got all these articles and ebooks and white papers everywhere, and they're trying to like make sense of it all, and it just causes more confusion. So I think
Hmm.
um, what I do to combat that is I have my go-to sources. So
Right.
the ones that I like and I trust. And for me, it's always been Harvard Business, which has always been sort of a
Yeah.
staple for me. I like Gallup for data and
Yep.
research and so on. And I'm not saying go to those two. I'm just saying,
Right.
at some point you need to kind of pick your sources,
Hmm.
and also, really focus on your business.
Yeah.
I keep going back to that, your business runs and your HR strategy kind of flows with it. So you need to
Hmm.
focus on that and
Right.
don't be so concerned about what some of the other, tech companies are doing.
Hmm. Cutting out the noise, it sounds like, and just
Yeah.
focusing
If
on
that's
what's,
possible. And I know
yeah.
that's hard. Look, I'm a culprit of it. I like reading stuff. So, but it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that was nice, but this would never work in a growing
Hmm.
SMB.
Yeah,
It's
and
not be
that's
very
it's
smooth.
important to contextualize it and understand that we're not getting the full picture from an article. There's so many interacting factors with a performance management system and a way of administering compensation, a way of evaluating employee engagement, or
Of
a
course.
way of rolling out learning and development. And they will work, but all in different organizations with different factors around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every company is different, and of
Hmm.
course, I know that companies like Google have their Google education
Hmm.
sources and so on, and different guides and templates and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's all good stuff. It's just the reason why that it works for them is because they built it for them, right?
Hmm.
So, and that's what companies have to do. And of course, I understand that you know, SMBs don't have armies of HR people, and
Hmm.
of course they're stretched, financially and so on. So just
Hmm.
keep it simple.
And I think that's a great note to end on. But before we wrap up, I
Sure.
would like to take us to the lightning round, which is three questions that are, you can respond with either a word, a sentence, or if you feel inclined, a little anecdote. I
Okay.
promise they're not tough. Well, at least I don't think they are. I guess I'll let you be
Okay.
the judge of that. Okay, Jeff, are you ready?
Yes. Go.
Okay. Number one, what is the number one thing that you think HR leaders need to transform their thinking on?
Transform their what on?
Their thinking on.
Jesus. Um, I think it needs to be. There's so many, but I think that the biggest one today needs to be how they build HR strategy.
Hmm.
It needs to be completely connected to their business.
Hmm.
And even though you've worked for 10 different organizations, each one different. So I've seen so many organizations do it, but it's not, it doesn't sound right to me. I think
Hmm.
that's the biggest thing is they need to really transform their thinking. Just, forget about the noise. Focus on your organization as to
Hmm.
what they are trying to do.
Yeah, like you said, keep it simple. Number two, what is the most impactful piece of feedback that you've ever received?
Oh my God. So I received a piece of feedback years ago. So if you've ever taken the Myers-Briggs, I
Hmm.
don't even know what it is, personality indicator. There's E in the I, and the E is extroversion, and I is the opposite. And most people have a combination of the two. Well, I'm
Hmm.
100% E, zero on I. It doesn't mean that I can't go that way. It's just my natural tendencies. And so what
Hmm.
that did, to early in my career, I was typically the loudest person in the room, and
Hmm.
and it wasn't, it was enthusiasm, right?
Hmm.
Because I love my work. So one piece of feedback for me that was really impactful is that, Jeff, keep being you, but you need to actually listen more. And I think that was the biggest thing for me because by not listening and always being on the offensive in terms of
Right.
activity, created the perception that I was cocky. And that
Hmm.
was not me. I don't think I'm a cocky person or arrogant and so on. That's not a
Right.
trait of mine at all. But it came across that way. And so
Right.
I didn't want that at all. So that was the true kicker for me. And then once I understood how to listen and ask questions and just take a step back, just take a breath, I think that actually changed a lot of things for me.
That's amazing. And I love how that feedback was delivered, which is we're not trying to
Yeah.
change you. We're just trying to show you how you're coming off and giving
Yeah.
you the power to decide how to use that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, last one. How much of
Okay.
your journey is made up of failures and how much of your journey is made up of successes?
Oh my God. So do you want like a number, like a percentage?
Sure. Yeah.
I would probably say more than three quarters is probably made up of a failure. I think earlier on in my career, I had a hard time with that
Hmm.
because my upbringing was always about being perfect and not
Hmm.
failing, and so I obviously learned, the hard way. Um, and that failure is okay, but I think the biggest thing is that I can't keep failing on the same thing all the time. That I need to learn,
Hmm.
right? But I think taking a risk and trying
Hmm.
something new and has sort of made me into to who I am today, and I'm
Hmm.
actually thankful for it. So,
Yeah, that's amazing. There's always going to be failures along the journey to success, right?
well, I mean, I'm like I don't go out like trying something and then saying my goal is to fail. Well, no, it's like I'm
Yes,
open to it because I'm
yes.
going to make errors in judgment or
Hmm.
so forth, and but it's just part of my process. Is that if it does come
Yeah.
up and I go, you know what, let's do a debrief, let's stop quickly, we'll figure this out, and
Hmm.
then we'll just change course. And I've done that a million times with my own company. Um,
Hmm.
I just went through a pivot
Yeah.
and it taking a little, a bit longer, than I thought. And that was because of certain things along the way. But you know
Hmm.
what? You just kind of roll with it and you keep
Hmm.
going.
And that's something we can all adopt in our day to day, whether we own our own company or whether we're working for another one. Just again, it's all part of the learning. You have to be willing to take risks to learn, and that's part of it. So, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Jeff. It was so wonderful to get to speak with you. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Well, thank you for, having me.
You're welcome. All right, and